What's up, guys? Danny here from the Lasercast, and I just got done watching easily the craziest movie of 2021, James Wan's Malignant, which opened in theaters yesterday and is streaming on HBO Max as well. I watched it on HBO Max, but rest assured, I am definitely going to be going to the theater to see this. This is a movie that I feel like I'm going to end up rewatching countless times for a variety of reasons. I had avoided spoilers on this, and I had seen every type of reaction that you could possibly imagine for this film. I had a very a good friend who reviews films for another publication that I write for, said that this was one of the most comically, hilariously, embarrassingly bad movies that he saw this year. I've seen countless people say that it is one of the most insanely fun and craziest horror films that they've seen this year. The reactions on Malignant run the gamut from awful to amazing. And I feel like this movie... I said this to my wife, Athena, who we watched it together with a friend of ours. I said, this movie, the movie that it reminded me the most of, not in the idea, not because it was similar in plot at all, but it reminded me so much of Drag Me to Hell. Drag Me to Hell is an insanely over-the-top, hilarious, in-your-face, effects-laden, Sam Raimi horror film. And Sam Raimi, as most of you know, was the Evil Dead guy. He did the super low budget Evil Dead back in the early 80s. He did Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness to complete the trilogy. He also did Darkman. And then all of a sudden, the early 2000s come around and he's handed the reins to Spider-Man. And Sam Raimi, to most people at that point, becomes known as a big-budget superhero filmmaker. And then years go by, and he returns to horror with this psychotic movie, Drag Me to Hell, which I saw with my sister, and there's a scene in that movie where a goat starts talking. And I remember saying to my sister in the movie theater, if that goat starts talking, I love this movie. And the goat started talking, and I just loved it. And it felt like, Sam Raimi had that movie inside of him for years. And he couldn't make it because he was off making these big-budget Spider-Man movies. Well, James Wan is very similar. James Wan, like Sam Raimi, started with low-budget, in-your-face, really gory horror movies. He did Saw. Then he did... The Conjuring, he did Insidious and Insidious 2, started that franchise. He did The Conjuring and Conjuring 2, and then served as a producer for the rest of the Conjuring universe. And then, after 3 horror franchises, he was given a Fast and the Furious movie. Made a lot of money. And he was given Aquaman, and it made even more money. And now he's working on Aquaman 2. And it's like this guy who was really entrenched in horror got kidnapped by the big budget special effects superhero genre. And after 5 years, for the first time since The Conjuring 2 in 2016, James Wan returns to horror. And my God, it felt like James Wan had not one idea or 2 ideas, but all of the ideas. And instead of saying, I'm going to make a series of interesting horror films, he said, nope, I'm going to make one horror movie, and I'm going to throw all this shit in there. And Malignant is... It's insane. So, with no spoilers... If you've seen the trailer, Annabelle Wallis, who played the lead, ironically, in Annabelle, which, of course, comes from the Conjuring universe, She plays a woman named Maddie who is having these visions of people getting murdered. And she goes to the police and she's telling the police, I saw these people die. And they don't know if she has a psychic connection to the killer, or, one of the cops thinks that she's the number one suspect. One of the inciting incidents is at the beginning of the film is that she's pregnant and she has an abusive husband who really slams her head into the wall. He goes downstairs to sleep on the couch, and that night he gets brutally murdered. And there's all this weird stuff going on with the electricity. And we know that there is some stuff in Maddie's past that is going to come back. Again, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. If you've seen the trailer, there's VHS tapes of her talking about an imaginary friend named Gabriel from when she was a little girl. Again, there are so many things in this movie where I feel like they could have been individual movies, and James Wan said, no, just throw it all. This was one of those cases where he said, I'm going to throw it against the wall to see what sticks. And for him, everything just stuck to the wall. And he said, all right, I guess we'll just throw all of that in there. I'm not going to lie. The first hour of this movie, it's a little rough. I kept looking at my wife and our friend that was over, and we were watching on HBO Max, and we kept looking at each other like, this all seems so silly. Some of the acting, some of the the lead character, I thought she was wearing a wig. I don't know, maybe her hair was done in a specific way. There's a lot of stuff that it doesn't look necessarily as polished as a normal James Wan horror film. Charlotte and I just watched recently The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2, Insidious 2 I've rewatched recently. James Wan's horror films, for the most part, are polished. This actually reminded me a lot of Dead Silence, a movie that Pete and I just watched and reviewed for our James Wan-a-thon that we're doing. And our review of Dead Silence is going to be up on our channel very soon. And this kind of felt like that, where for the first hour anyway, where things are happening and you're kind of left going like, wait, is this a supernatural movie? Is it a serial killer movie? Is there a serial killer with superpowers movie? You really don't know what's going on. And the movie struggles to kind of find itself for the first hour. And really, this movie gets to a point where it was fun to watch with people. I feel like I enjoyed this movie more because I was watching it with my wife and a friend, and we could kind of laugh at some of the things. There is a scene in this movie, and not a spoiler, but there is a scene in this movie where a person parks a car and pulls the car up to the literal edge of a cliff. And we all were hysterically laughing. You've got to be kidding me. She felt the need to pull the car up that far to the cliff. Are you kidding? It was almost like a Chekhov's gun situation where I just kept waiting I was like, oh, well, I know how this scene's going to end. That car is going off the cliff at some point. And all of these ridiculous, crazy things are happening. And then there is a moment at around the 70 to 80 minute mark of this movie. This is a long-ish movie. It's an hour and 51 minutes. This is not your average, 85, 90 minute horror movie. There is a moment at about the 75 minute mark where this movie takes a hard turn and goes from being a kind of, this is kind of, it's a weird movie, and I don't know if I like it, and it becomes something that people are going to talk about, for better or for worse, for a very long time. I saw somebody tweet about this movie and say, there are so many horror movies specifically that get made that even if they're good, you don't really remember them 5 to 10 years down the road. Malignant is going to be remembered 5 to 10 years down the road. In fact, I would not be shocked if James Wan figured out a way to spin this off into yet another franchise number 4 that he would start, which at that point would pretty much shoot him into the pantheon of horror directors, because there are the list of horror directors that have, spearheaded 3 franchises is pretty much James Wan, and that's it. So if he can launch this off into a 4th franchise, I would be shocked. The last 30 to 35 minutes of this movie, I was so gleefully entertained by the outrageousness of everything about it. The plot twists, the special effects, the action, the brutal, in-your-face violence. I can totally see the point of view that this movie is just over the top, ridiculous, and bad. I can see that. But I'm a sucker for a film and for a filmmaker who just goes all in. I just rewatched Jason Goes to Hell with Charlotte the other night. And shockingly, after almost 30 years since I first saw that movie, I finally appreciate it for the over-the-top, ridiculous, psychotic mess that it is. And I love it. And it's now one of my favorite Friday movies. Malignant is like that. It is so... My jaw was hanging open the last 30 minutes of this movie. I could not believe what I was watching, and I say that in the best possible way. For better or for worse, the last 30 minutes of this movie need to be seen to be believed. I have not spoiled anything so far. I am not going to spoil anything. I want you to go and watch I want you to watch the whole movie just so that you can get to that last 30 minutes. I had a friend on Facebook who told me that he basically didn't really like it and that all the movie had was gore and that it was stupid and everything else. And I said to him, look, the last 30 minutes of this movie made up and atoned for all of the issues that I had. This is the type of movie where if I was, putting on my critic hat, I would be writing down a list of all the issues that I had with the movie in the first hour to hour plus. By the end of the movie, I didn't care anymore. I was so entertained, shocked, and happy as a horror movie fan that James Wan, one of the most iconic horror directors of a generation now, came back and made this movie. After making billion-dollar movies in the Fast and the Furious franchise and the DC universe, he came back to horror to make this movie, and it is so gleefully over the top. And that last 30 minutes is just, it has to be seen to be believed. That's all I could say. I want to talk spoilers here, but I won't. I am going to hold out. I know Pete is watching the movie, and I'm going to hold out that Pete and I can do more of a spoilerific discussion about this movie. I will say James Wan wrote the movie with Akilah Cooper and Ingrid Bisu. Ingrid Bisu actually has a starring role in the film. She's in it, and she's actually in a lot of the other She's in a few of the other Conjuring Universe films. She was in The Devil Made Me Do It. She had a small role in that. If you're an avid James Wan fan, you'll notice McKenna Grace, Patricia Velasquez, who were in a lot of the Conjuring Universe films as well. Joseph Bishara returns to do the music, and my wife and our friend and me, we were like, wow, the music in this movie is freaking intense. It's almost like a character in the movie, especially in the first hour. There's so much crazy synth and like just pounding music. It felt like you were at a goth club in the late 90s, early 2000s. So much. I wrote down a list of movies and things that I got reminded of watching this from a plot perspective. I'll save those for when Pete and I do a bigger and crazier discussion that involves spoilers. But go out of your way to watch this movie. I can't wait to watch it again. I am going to go to the movies, maybe tomorrow if I have time, to see this. And it's on HBO Max. I cannot recommend this movie enough. If you're sitting there for the first hour or so and you're really struggling, just hold out, because that last half hour, it is some of the most over-the-top fun I've had in a horror movie in a very long time. And that's all you could ask for, especially if you're sitting on the couch. If you don't want to go to the movie theater for medical reasons or for COVID reasons, just to be able to sit down on the couch and pop on HBO Max and watch this movie, my goodness, that last half hour, I almost want to go watch it again right now before I go to bed because of how just absurd it is. But yeah, this has been Danny from the Lacercast. Go watch Malignant. Stay tuned on this channel. Pete and I are going to have a review of James Wan's Dead Silence coming up. We have right now on the channel an interview with Max Booth III, the writer of the novella and screenplay of We Need to Do Something, which is a kick-ass little horror movie that is available on VOD now and in limited theatrical release. So you could check that out. And Pete and I are going to cover this movie with a lot of spoilers coming soon as well. So stay tuned to more exciting stuff from the Lacercast, and go watch Malignant. Go watch that last half hour.